Do your emotions feel like untamed waves crashing and overwhelming you? What if a simple daily watercolor practice can help you regulate those emotions, bringing a sense of calm and control? In this video, I'll show you easy, accessible watercolor exercise specifically designed to help you regulate your emotions and find your inner calm. Let's paint your way to emotional balance. Welcome back to my channel. This is Deepika, and I'm here to help you slow down, release stress, and reconnect with yourself using watercolor techniques. Today, we are going to use watercolor in a slightly different way. This isn't about creating a perfect painting, and it isn't even really about making something beautiful. Today, we are going to use color, water, movement, texture, and a little bit of space on paper to help us regulate our emotions and come back to balance. Because sometimes when emotions feel heavy, our first instinct is to fix them. We want to understand them. We want to get rid of them. We want to feel positive again. I understand. But emotional balance doesn't always mean feeling happy. Sometimes balance simply means I can feel what I'm feeling and I'm still okay. And that's exactly what we are going to be practicing today. I'm using very simple set of tools. A card, a small stick, a number 2 brush, a water spray bottle, and a few watercolor pigments. The colors I naturally felt drawn to today are blue, violet, green, and brown. And I want to invite you to notice something before we begin. Don't choose colors because you think you should choose them. Look at your colors and ask yourself, which color am I naturally attracted to today? There is no correct answer. Your job isn't to make the right choice. Your job is simply to notice. Because that noticing is already the beginning of your emotional awareness. Choose the colors that you are naturally attracted to. Before we paint, let's talk about color. We often have emotional associations with colors. They're not universal rules. Different cultures and different people can experience colors differently. But we can still use those personal associations as a way of checking in with ourselves. For many people, blue can feel quiet, spacious, cool, and calming. Green can remind us of nature, growth, renewal, and stability. Violet can feel introspective, mysterious, deep, and contemplative. And brown can feel grounded, earthy, stable, and connected to the physical world. I'm going to start by using this card to make my horizon. And then I'm going to spray some water onto paper. I'm going to let the watercolor interact with that water. I wasn't feeling particularly joyful when I started this painting. I was feeling emotionally heavy. I don't know if you have ever had one of those days where nothing is necessarily wrong, but internally you just feel heavy. A little full, a little tired emotionally. I was feeling something like that today. I was also experimenting with a few paintings before this one, and honestly, two of them didn't work. They got spoiled. And that can be frustrating, especially when you're already emotionally heavy. But instead of stopping there, I decided to try again. And this is something I really want you to remember throughout today's practice. A difficult emotional state doesn't have to become the end of the story. We can try again, not because we failed, but because we are still here. We are still capable of taking another small step. Look at that. This is actually one of my favorite parts. The pigment moves, it spreads, it creates edges that I didn't deliberately draw. And something about watching that movement immediately releases a little bit of tension for me. Because there's nothing I need to force. I don't have to make the pigment move in exactly the direction I want. The water is doing some of the work. And emotionally, there's something beautiful about that. Because we often try to control every part of our internal experiences. Why am I feeling this? How do I stop feeling this? Why can't I just be okay? But emotions don't always respond to force. Sometimes they need a little space to move. So, as you watch your own pigment spread, try something very simple. Don't go to judge the shape. Don't go to correct it. Just watch it. And notice whether your body can soften even slightly while you're observing. You don't have to relax completely. Even 1% softer is enough. I'm going to make some very simple horizontal movements to create the feeling of waves. And this is another part that feels very regulating for me. The movement is repetitive, back and forth. There's no complicated decisions here. I don't have to figure out what the next stroke should be. I'm simply following the movement. And repetitive, predictable movements can give our attention something steady to focus on. So instead of continuously thinking about everything happening in our lives, we give our attention one simple thing, this movement, back and forth. And I want you to notice something, that we are not painting an ocean because we are trying to escape our emotions. We are painting an ocean because we are practicing the movement. Emotions also move. They rise, they change, they become stronger, they become softer, and sometimes they stay for a while. But we don't have to become the emotion. We can simply observe it. Just like we can observe a wave. A wave can be intense, but it is still a wave. It doesn't stay at its highest point forever. So, while you're making these horizontal movements, imagine that you're giving your emotions permission to move without needing to be solved. You don't have to push them away. You don't have to hold on to them. Just let them move. I'm going to work on the sky using wet on wet. This is a small painting decision, but I want to connect it to something much bigger, boundaries. When emotions become overwhelming, everything can sometimes feel like it's happening everywhere at once. Our thoughts, our responsibilities, our worries, our memories, our physical sensations, everything becomes one big emotional space. So, sometimes it can help to create a container. Not to suppress what we are feeling, but to give it a place. That's what we are doing visually. The sky has its own space. The ocean has its own space. The land has its own space. And they can all exist together without taking over the entire page. And this is also why I deliberately want to leave some empty areas. Empty space can seem like nothing, but perceptually, our brain uses space to separate and organize what we are seeing. When everything is crowded, our attention has more competing information to process. When there is breathing room, individual elements can become easier to distinguish. And that's something we can consciously create in our art. We don't need to fill every inch. And emotionally, that's a beautiful reminder too. That not every empty space needs to be filled. Not every silence needs an explanation. Not every moment needs stimulation. Not every emotion needs immediate action. Sometimes our nervous system benefits from a little room, a little space. So, while you're painting this today, allow yourself to leave something unfinished. Allow the white paper to remain visible. Let the painting breathe, and maybe while you're doing that, let yourself breathe too. I'm going to use this small card again with some brown, and I'm going to create a loose stone-like texture. Look at that texture. This is so different from what we were doing before. And I think this is where something interesting happens emotionally. I'm trying something new. Like, I don't use this card usually in my paintings. I don't completely know what the result will look like. And there's a tiny bit of uncertainty. But there's also curiosity. And that curiosity changes the quality of our attention. So instead of asking, will this be perfect? I'm thinking, I wonder what will happen. And that's a completely different mental state. When we are perfectionistic, our attention can become focused on evaluation. Is this good? Is this bad? Did I ruin it? But curiosity shifts us towards exploration. What happens if I try this? And I think that's one reason I enjoy this part so much. The texture is satisfying. The result is unpredictable. And my brain has something new to observe. I hope that you enjoy this part too. And if your texture doesn't look like my texture, that's actually perfect. Because you sitting on your table and doing this is not to reproduce my emotional state. But instead, you're discovering your own emotional state. So that's okay. Do you remember those first two paintings I mentioned? They didn't work. If I had decided, that's it, I'm not painting anymore, I wouldn't have reached this moment. Sometimes we treat mistakes as evidence that we aren't capable. But what if a mistake is simply information? That didn't work. Okay, try something else. This is one of the most useful things we can practice through creative work. Continuing without demanding perfection. You can make a mistake, pause, and continue. You can dislike something and still continue. You can feel emotionally heavy and continue. You can have a difficult day and still create one small peaceful moment. These are the colors I am responding to today. And that's the real practice. We're not trying to use color like a formula that says blue equals calm. Instead, we are asking, what does blue mean to me today? Maybe blue feels peaceful to you, maybe it feels lonely, maybe it reminds you of the ocean, or maybe it reminds you of the sky. There is no wrong emotional response here. The important thing is that you are noticing your response. That is emotional awareness. Now I'm taking my little stick. I'm going to use the edge to create these loose vertical lines for the grass. I'm not trying to make every line identical. Some are short, some are long, some may be darker, and some are lighter. And that's okay. Because balance doesn't mean everything is equal. Balance doesn't mean every emotion has the same intensity. Balance means different things can exist together. You can feel sadness and still experience calm. You can feel disappointment and still feel hopeful. You can feel tired and still be present. Emotional balance is not the absence of difficult emotions. It's the ability to make space for the whole experience without being completely pulled away by one part of it. Now I'm going to dab some little dots. And then I'll sprinkle some whites. This is where I'm going to slow down even more. Because when I'm dabbing these dots and sprinkling the white marks, I have to pay attention. I have to notice how much paint is on the brush, how I hold it, how gently I tap, where the drops are landing. And suddenly, I'm not thinking about yesterday, I'm not thinking about tomorrow, I'm not thinking about whether the painting is good enough. I'm just here, right here, watching these tiny marks appear. And this is what being present can feel like. It doesn't have to be some huge spiritual experience. Sometimes presence is simply I'm watching this tiny drop of paint land on paper. And for those few seconds, that's enough. I'm going to add just few final touches to the waves and then I'm going to stop. Not because the painting is technically perfect, but because it feels complete enough for me. And I want to take a moment before we move on. Look at your painting. Don't evaluate it, just look. And ask yourself 3 questions. What was I feeling when I started? What am I feeling now? And what changed? Maybe your emotion changed. Maybe it didn't. And that's okay. But perhaps your emotion is still there, but it feels slightly less overwhelming. Maybe you feel more grounded. Maybe you feel clear. Maybe you simply feel more present. That counts. Yes, that also counts. For me, this painting didn't leave me feeling wildly joyful. It left me feeling balanced. And honestly, that's what I needed today. I started this painting feeling emotionally heavy. And after 2 unsuccessful experiments, I could have stopped. But the third attempt brought me somewhere different. Not necessarily happiness, not excitement, just a little more balance. And sometimes that's the goal. Not to turn sadness into happiness, not to force ourselves into positivity, but to move from I can't handle what I'm feeling towards I can sit with what I'm feeling. So, whenever you are feeling emotionally overloaded, you can use this as a very simple daily practice. You don't need this exact painting. You don't need expensive materials. You don't even need to know how to paint. Just take a piece of paper, choose a few colors you are naturally drawn to, and ask, what do I need more of right now? Maybe space, maybe movement, maybe grounding, maybe softness, or maybe curiosity. Then let your painting respond to that. Use repetitive moments when you need steadiness. Use water when you want to observe movement. Use empty space when everything feels crowded. Use texture when you need something sensory to focus on. And use imperfect marks when you're practicing letting go of control. You can even make the entire practice 5 minutes long. Because emotional balance doesn't always require a huge transformation. Sometimes it's built through tiny moments of returning. Returning to your breath, returning to your body, returning to your senses. Returning to the present moment. And most importantly, returning to your own self. And before we finish, I want you to remember something from my experience today. 2 paintings didn't work, the third one did. But the most important part wasn't that the third painting was better. The important part was that I tried again. Sometimes we think emotional resilience means never getting overwhelmed. It doesn't. Sometimes resilience looks like, this didn't work, let me try again. Or today feels heavy, let me take 5 quiet minutes. And I don't know exactly what I'm feeling, let me begin anyway. That's what today's painting gave me, a way to return. And maybe you can create your own little return ritual with watercolor. You can do it in the morning, after work, or before bed. Or any time you notice that your emotions are being a little too loud. You don't have to create a masterpiece. You just have to create a little space to notice yourself. So, if you would like to try this practice, make your own version of this painting. Choose the colors you're naturally drawn to. Don't worry about making it look like mine. And when you're finished, I would love for you to pause and ask, do you feel different from when you started? Not better, not happier, just different. Maybe a little softer, calmer, or more grounded, or simply present. And if you enjoyed this practice, subscribe to the channel and come back for more gentle watercolor practices designed to help you slow down, reconnect, and create a little more emotional balance in your everyday life. And remember, you don't have to stop feeling emotions to feel balanced. Sometimes balance begins when we simply give those emotions a safe place to move. I'll see you in the next painting. Until then, keep creating, keep breathing, and keep returning to yourself. See you.